I have been beginning each of my homilies with a public confession, which I'll continue for this homily as well. And it harkens back to a memory of mine from about not quite half my life ago, which was the first and only time that I can recall ever buying a lottery ticket for the Mega Millions, which I did at the ripe old age of 18. Because, you know, you can do those things at 18. And I thought, why not? Just for fun. Now, I did not win the lottery at the age of 18. I want you to know that. But you should also know that on Friday, for the second time in my life, I played the lottery. Because, you know, it was $1 billion after all. And I thought, why not? There was a group of my friends who were all on a text messaging thread, and they're like, we're all going to go in and get a bunch of tickets. You want to throw in $10? And I was like, sure, why not? And, you know, I have to come clean with you all. Honest to God, I did not win the $1 billion. It's a tragedy. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to donate a roof pool to the church. And I know that we were all holding out hope for that. I just want to apologize to you. You got to hold on. Just not this year. You know, maybe next year we can have the roof pool. So I looked it up on Google, and I think the odds of winning the Mega Millions are like 1 in 200 and something million, which pretty much means that whenever you play the lottery, you're just not going to win. You're just going to donate that money. But I kind of thought to myself, you know what? It's kind of like going to a movie. Because for the price of $10, I can spend the next several hours enjoying all of my hopes and dreams, just thinking up all the stuff that I would do with $1 billion and how amazing that would be. And it went something like this, which is, I think, if you're like me, you've probably prayed this prayer at least once in your life. I said, God, if you let me win the lottery, I won't keep any of it for myself. I'll give it all away. It's $1 billion, God. Just think of all the amazing stuff that we could do with that money, God. All the cool things we could build, all the people that we could help. It would be incredible. Don't you want me to win the lottery, God? And he said, nope. And that was the end of that discussion. But I find it funny, and we'll say maybe a comical representation of modern man's version of the gospel story, right, that we hear today. And Jesus, who is also going about his life, doing his thing, being amazing, teaching all the people. And he gets this guy who comes up to him in the crowd, and as we heard it said in the gospel, the guy says, teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me. And what Jesus points out to him is something that we all know is true, right, in the modern day as well. Jesus looks at him and he says, you know that wealth can become a cause of division in the world. And you know, unfortunately, and even more painfully, sometimes family wealth can become a cause of division and pain and resentment in the world. And these are just sad and difficult, hard things. But because he's Jesus, he does not miss the opportunity to make a more important point about what's going on. And he speaks to this man, which is kind of interesting because it's kind of a private family matter. So why this guy is bringing it up in public, like, I don't know, you know, but he is. And so Jesus is like, all right, well, we're going to go this way. And he says to the man, in essence, as he might say to us, you know, when we want to win the billion, he says, you don't really know what you're asking me because I don't think you're quite sure yet who you are. But if you knew who you are, and if you knew what you were really made of, we would be having a different conversation and you'd be asking me a different question. And he says this by way of a parable, right? By way of a story to make that point. And it's a story, of course, that most of us or all of us are familiar with. The guy who's got not enough space and too much stuff, and he says, all right, so let me tear it down. I'm going to build bigger things to store all my stuff. And now that I've got the $1 billion, I don't have to worry anymore. And what's really, I'll say, important and striking about this parable is not actually something that we quite hear in the way that it's rendered into English here. And so I want to tweak it slightly in a more direct way so that if Jesus were standing here on this spot telling you the same parable, I want to tell it to you how he would probably tell it to you in English, because this is how we heard it as it was in the gospel. The man says, "There I shall store," right, in all my barns. "There I shall store all my grain and other goods, and I shall say to myself, now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong?" Now, perhaps a better, more accurate way of hearing what Jesus actually spoke to the crowds would be this in English. "There I shall store all my grain and other goods, and I shall say to my soul, soul, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this night your soul will be demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong?" And I think when we hear maybe that more direct language that is what was communicated to the crowds, it helps us make sense how plainly Jesus was kind of asking this question. But don't you know who you are? Don't you know of what you've been made? He's trying to put in relief the hunger that is inside this man, really, and sort of the misplaced way he's trying to satisfy that hunger. It would be like this. It would be like if I stood here and proclaimed to all of you guys, "I'm thirsty. I think I'm going to go over there and take a bite out of the car tire." And you would look at me and you would say, "That's ludicrous, Father Brian. I don't think that you should do that. That's not a good idea." And you would be right, because you would plainly see that in the communication of my own need, I would be trying to satisfy that need in a manner that was never going to satisfy it. I mean, there's probably even a better category. It'd be like, "I'm thirsty. I think I'm going to go buy some copy paper." Like, it's just a different order. It's a different category of need altogether. They're just like so far removed from each other, it doesn't even make sense to kind of put it in the same sentence. And Jesus says it this way, "Man, do you not know who you are?" And the man said, Jesus says to the man, "It's as if you're saying to me, my soul is hungry. I think I'm going to go get some money." They're just not in the same categories of each other whatsoever. It would be ludicrous for us to think that the human soul could be satisfied by a material, limited thing. And so he makes this really important clarification in a world that needed to hear it in his day, and just as much needs to hear it in our day. Because the man was convinced, as many of us are convinced, that, you want to know what? If I just had the billion, my life would be fine. And don't we all think that? I mean, it's very natural and obvious to say, man, if I literally if money was no object to me, my life would be great. I literally would have nothing to worry about, because I could just solve all the things. Whatever it is that was needed, I could just do it. And so we have this sort of natural instinct to say that the inheritance, as it were, my possessions, my things, those are the things that are going to fill the hunger, that are going to make my life full and worth living. And Jesus says it's just a different category altogether. You don't even know what you're talking about, because you just have to examine who you are and what you're really made of. Because you're not just a body, you're a soul. And Jesus says it's important to be rich in the things of the soul. And to be rich in the things of the soul is the gateway not only to, we'll say, the happy and satisfied life here in the now, but also here in the after. And so Jesus wants to address and come in and break through so that we can be reminded of what it is that we're truly hungry for and where it is that we're really going to find that. He says material things can become an obstacle to the immaterial wealth you've been made for. Because your soul, like my soul, is not something that we have sense experience of. It's a gospel a lot about sacraments. What do I mean? It's a gospel about something invisible that's real, that somehow we know is real because it's able to kind of manifest itself so that we can comprehend it in a material way. Something invisible that communicates itself visibly in some manner. You can't see my soul. You can't touch it. You can't taste it, smell it. You can't hear it. But you know that I have one. And the reason that you know that I have one is because if I didn't, if my soul wasn't here, this flesh would drop to the ground immediately dead. That is the basic way that we know that someone is alive or not, is if their soul is there. So you know my soul is here before you because my body is still living. And even though you can't see it, somehow it's nonetheless present to you. And it's plain. This is kind of like what that means. And Jesus says, well, what about the hunger of your soul? What about the riches of the soul? What fills that? And can it be filled with something that we see? With something that we taste and touch and hear? Can we do something like gain possessions and inheritance and property and kind of fit it in and make it happen? And Jesus says it's just not going to happen ever by definition. St. Paul will go something of the same route. We kind of heard this in the second reading. St. Paul says it's not just the material world that can become an obstacle to the true riches of the soul. The immaterial things, there are also invisible things that can also be an obstacle to the invisible riches. And what does he say? St. Paul says it like this: seek what is above, not what is on earth. And he says these are the things that are on earth that we have to put to death: immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, greed, idolatry, deceit, vices that live inside of the human heart, invisible things that aren't directly known, that nonetheless can be what we search for when we're really looking for something else. And that's what brings us here, right, into this Sunday celebration, and we ask ourselves, what do we do on a Sunday exactly? Why do we decide to worship? What does it mean to believe in Jesus? It's in its own way a kind of personal response to this very gospel passage where we kind of proclaim to each other and to God and to ourselves, you know what? I know who I am. And I know the stuff I'm made from. And I know what that stuff really hungers for. And I'm able to provide for that deeper hunger, that deeper need. Because when we come here and we find ourselves, how to become rich in the things of the soul, we ask ourselves how Jesus enriches the soul. Because he knows that we're hungry. And he's ready because he's good to provide those riches. And he says, those riches are me. So that's pure and simple. And that's the thing. When our souls are demanded of us and when we stand before God, he'll be there and we'll be here. And there's only one test. And the test is this. He's going to see if he can see himself when he looks at you. That's the test. That's the test of our souls. Can Jesus look at our souls? And can he see himself? And if Jesus looks at your soul and he sees himself in your soul, then you are rich in the things that matter to God. And I am rich in the things that matter to God. And then God says to you, blessed are you by my Father. Come and receive the inheritance that has been prepared for you since before the foundation of the world. But if he doesn't see himself when he looks at you, when he looks at me and our souls, then that is bad eternal news for us. And it is not a road that we want to walk, not a place that we want to choose. And that's what makes us, as Catholics, the absolutely most fortunate people on the face of the earth. There's nobody on the earth more fortunate than you. There's just nobody more fortunate than you. Because whenever you and I walk into a space such as this, we receive from this altar a sacrament, which is Jesus, which is the riches of the human soul that we have been created to be hungry for and to be filled to overflowing with. And God is so good that He's ready and willing and desperate even to give that to us so that we can receive it. You know, I was really edified by this fact and something that I saw a couple days ago on Twitter, which was a video posted from a cell phone by a woman in a church who witnessed a Eucharistic miracle 8 days ago on July 23rd in a parish called Our Lady of the Holy Rosary just outside of Guadalajara, Mexico. And in this Eucharistic miracle, when we say that phrase, we understand, first of all, that Eucharist is already a miracle. Every time we come to church, it's a miracle. It's impossible on a natural level what we profess to believe about what happens in this sacrament. But when we say Eucharistic miracle, what we mean is that the thing that is already incredible and impossible somehow makes itself supernaturally visible to us in a way beyond what nature can do, even to the sensory experience. It's the miracle that we know to be true by faith is the miracle now made manifest to our senses in an impossible manner. And what happened was this. 8 days ago in that church, the priest finished celebrating Mass, and after Mass they had a time of Eucharistic public adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, and he brought the monstrance and he placed the monstrance on the altar, and it was one of these big monstrances that hold a host about this large so that you could see it from far away. And the priest prayed the prayers at the beginning of such a time of adoration, and then he left the foot of the altar back to the sacristy to unvest, and as soon as he finished the prayers, all of the people sitting in the pews right here were looking up at the host, and they began to witness a miracle occur, which was that the host began to beat, palpitate like a human heart, visibly. With their own eyes, they could see it. And there was a woman there who had the wherewithal to pull out her cell phone in the moment and record it. And to her I say, good job. That's exactly a time when you bring your cell phone out in church because the world needs to see that. And she recorded 35 seconds. From the placing of it, it appears that she's probably about 40 or 50 feet back, standing in the center aisle, just holding her camera in her hands, probably zoomed in, that's a little bit shaky and grainy. And for about 35 seconds, she just recorded a Eucharistic host palpitating like this. And I was so edified when I saw that I pulled that video off of Twitter and I put it on my computer and I sent it to Owen, and we're going to watch it so that you can see as well. Now here's what I did. It's a little bit far away, especially for us standing here in church. So I took the original cell phone video, which is vertical like this, and at certain points I overlaid it with sort of a blown up, closer version of the host itself so that you can simply see it larger on the screen. And then at a certain point I added image stabilization so that it wasn't like shaky, so that you can see it clearly. And I want you to know that this is what we come to receive every Sunday when we're here to have the food of our souls in our bodies. This is what it is.
Tercera estación. Jesús cae por primera vez. Te adoramos, oh Cristo, y bendecimos
que por tu santa cruz redimiste al mundo y a mi pecador. Amén.
Jesús mío. Por esta primera caída te encomiendo a los sacerdotes jóvenes, a tus seminaristas. Dales a todos perseverancia y fortaleza. Y si alguno cae, Señor, levántalo para que siga en pos de ti. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. You see, I just really firmly believe that God's desire is to really break through and convict us and convince us about what's real, especially about what's real in the invisible world, and to remind us about who we are and of the stuff that we've actually been made from, so that we might know how to feed our invisible souls with the food of heaven, which comes to us in the Eucharist. And every time that we come up to communion and we receive, we make a throne for the King on our hands. And we allow God to be placed upon our tongue. And every time that happens, this is what's going on. A beating heart. That's what you receive on your hands, on your tongue. And eternal food, which are the true riches of the human soul, which literally transform us into the icon of Jesus whenever we communicate with God in this way, so that he can look at us and see himself, so that we can have the inheritance that we were created for. And I would simply want to offer that to us today as a word of deep encouragement in a world, including our own, that needs to hear desperately the truth, that we're not just here as bodies to take care of the bodily things, and to say that what makes a full life is the billion, so they don't have to worry anymore, but that you have a soul, and that I have a soul, and that we have been created to be rich in the things of the soul, because that's what we get to take with us. Money stays here, car stays here, house stays here. No material thing has any bearing whatsoever on whether or not you and I make it to heaven. What matters is, do you know who you are? And do you know the stuff that you're made from?